This is the story of my stay at St. Jude's, and trust me, it's not one you'll forget easily. It started innocently enough. A persistent cough, a nagging fever, the hallmarks of a nasty flu, or so I thought. My mom, bless her, wasn't taking any chances. She dragged me to St. Jude's, the imposing brick building that dominated the skyline of our small town. It always looked a bit foreboding, especially at night, with its dimly lit windows like vacant eyes staring out. The waiting room was the usual sterile environment, filled with coughing, sniffling, and the hushed anxiety of worried parents. After an eternity, a nurse with tired eyes called my name. I followed her down a labyrinthine corridor, the scent of antiseptic clinging to the air like a shroud. Dr. Albright, a man with a kind smile and a stethoscope that looked older than me, examined me thoroughly. His brow furrowed slightly. "We're going to run some tests just to be sure," he said, his voice carefully neutral. That's when the unease began to creep in. The tests were endless. Blood draws, x-rays, scans that whirred and clicked like ancient machinery. Each test seemed to take me further down a rabbit hole of uncertainty. My simple flu morphed into a possible infection, then a potential anomaly, and finally, the dreaded "we need to keep you for observation." They put me in room 313. It was small, sterile, and smelled faintly of bleach. The window offered a depressing view of the hospital's parking lot. As soon as the nurse left, a chill settled over the room, despite the thermostat being cranked up. I tried to distract myself with my phone, but the Wi-Fi was abysmal. The first night was unsettling. The hospital sounds, the beeping of machines, the distant cries, the muffled announcements, kept me on edge. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to a rhythmic tapping sound. It was coming from the wall beside my bed. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, deliberate, and utterly unnerving. I held my breath, listening intently. Was it a pipe, a loose tile, or something else? I banged on the wall, hoping to scare whatever it was away. The tapping stopped. I lay there, heart pounding, until the first rays of dawn peeked through the blinds. The next day, I told Dr. Albright about the tapping. He listened patiently, then attributed it to old building noises and prescribed me some sleeping pills. I took one that night, hoping for a peaceful slumber. It didn't work. The tapping returned, louder and more insistent this time. Tap, tap, tap. It was like something was trying to communicate. But what? I squeezed my eyes shut, willing it to stop, but the tapping continued, drilling into my skull. Then I heard something else. A faint whisper, barely audible above the hospital's hum. It seemed to be coming from the same wall as the tapping. I strained my ears, trying to decipher the words. "Help me." My blood ran cold. I was wide awake, the sleeping pill completely ineffective. I sat up in bed, my eyes darting around the room. Was I hallucinating? Was the fever finally getting to me? I decided I couldn't stay in that room another minute. I ripped the 4 from my arm, ignoring the sting, and stumbled out into the hallway. The corridor was eerily deserted. The only light came from the dim emergency lights that cast long, distorted shadows. As I walked, I noticed something odd. The numbers on the doors seemed to be shifting, blurring. I blinked, trying to focus, but they continued to waver, as if they were made of liquid. I quickened my pace, desperate to get away from the room 313. Then I saw her. At the end of the hallway, a figure stood bathed in shadow. It was a woman, dressed in a faded hospital gown. Her head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and her long, dark hair obscured her face. "Hello," I croaked, my voice trembling. The figure didn't respond. It just stood there, motionless, emanating an aura of profound sadness. Slowly, it raised a hand, pointing down the hallway, towards room 313. Panic surged through me. I turned and ran, blindly, not caring where I was going. I found myself in a stairwell, the concrete steps cold and damp beneath my bare feet. I descended, 2 steps at a time, until I reached the ground floor. I burst through the door and found myself in the hospital's abandoned West Wing. It was a forgotten world of peeling paint, broken windows, and dust-covered equipment. The air was thick with the smell of decay and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet. As I ventured deeper into the wing, I began to piece together a story. Old medical charts lay scattered on the floor, their ink faded but still legible. They spoke of experimental treatments, of patients suffering from mysterious ailments, of procedures performed in secret, and of a high mortality rate. One chart, in particular, caught my attention. It belonged to a young girl named Sarah, who had been admitted to the hospital in the 1950s. She suffered from a rare neurological disorder that caused her intense pain. The doctors had tried everything to alleviate her suffering, but nothing worked. The final entry in her chart was chilling. Patient unresponsive to all treatments. Commencing experimental procedure. Prognosis. Guarded. I felt a shiver run down my spine. The metallic scent in the air was growing stronger. As I rounded a corner, I saw the source. A makeshift operating room. In the center of the room, a rusty operating table stood under a single flickering light bulb. Medical instruments lay scattered around, stained with what looked suspiciously like dried blood. And on the wall, scrawled in what appeared to be the same substance, were the words, "Room 313 is the key." My mind reeled. Sarah, the tapping, the whisper, the woman in the hallway. It all clicked into place. Sarah wasn't just a patient. She was trapped. Her spirit was tethered to the hospital, forever reliving the horrors of her final days. And somehow I was connected to her. I knew I had to help her. But how? I was just a sick kid, trapped in a haunted hospital. What could I possibly do? Then, I remembered something. My grandmother, who had passed away a few years ago, had always been fascinated by the paranormal. She had taught me a few things about communicating with spirits, about helping them find peace. I closed my eyes, focusing my thoughts on Sarah. I imagined her pain, her fear, her desperation. And I spoke, not with my voice, but with my mind. Sarah, I thought, I know you're here. I know what happened to you. I want to help you. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, I felt a presence, a faint flicker of energy. It was weak, but it was there. Help me. The whisper echoed in my mind. How can I help you? I asked. Find the doll. The doll? What doll? I opened my eyes, my gaze sweeping across the room. And then I saw it. Tucked away in a corner, behind a stack of dusty boxes, was a porcelain doll. Its face was cracked and faded, but its eyes still held a spark of innocence. I picked up the doll, cradling it in my arms. As I did, I felt a surge of energy, a wave of emotion that washed over me. It was Sarah's. She was connected to the doll. It was her anchor to this world. I knew what I had to do. I had to return the doll to her room. I made my way back to the main hospital building, my heart pounding in my chest. The hallway was still deserted, the numbers on the doors still wavering. But this time I wasn't afraid. I had a purpose. I reached room 313 and hesitated for a moment. This was it, the final confrontation. I opened the door and stepped inside. The room was exactly as I had left it, cold and sterile. But now it felt different, felt expectant. I walked to the wall where the tapping had originated and placed the doll against it. As I did, the room began to glow. A soft, ethereal light filled the space, banishing the shadows and the chill. And then I saw her, Sarah. She was no longer a shadowy figure, but a young girl no older than 10, with long dark hair and sad blue eyes. She stood before me, shimmering and translucent, a faint smile on her lips. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice like the tinkling of bells. "You set me free." And then, she faded away, like mist dissolving in the morning sun. The light in the room dimmed, and the tapping stopped. Forever. I stood there for a long time, just breathing, letting the silence wash over me. I had done it. I had helped Sarah find peace. I left room 313 and walked back to the nurse's station. The staff was in a frenzy, searching for me. When they saw me, they rushed over, demanding to know where I had been. I told them everything. About the tapping, the whisper, the woman in the hallway, the abandoned West Wing, and Sarah. They looked at me like I was crazy. Dr. Albright, however, listened intently. When I finished, he looked thoughtful. "I'll look into it," he said, his voice noncommittal. The next day, they released me from the hospital. They said my tests came back negative, that I was perfectly healthy. As I left St. Jude's, I glanced back at room 313. The window was dark, empty. But somehow, I knew that Sarah was finally at peace. I never went back to St. Jude's, but I never forgot my experience there. It taught me that there are things in this world that we can't explain, things that exist beyond our understanding. And it taught me the importance of helping those who are in need, even if they are no longer among the living. Sometimes, the scariest monsters are the ones trapped within ourselves. And sometimes, all they need is a little help to find their way home.